Hello, everybody. I hope everybody is having a good day and you're enjoying things. Today, we were going to go over the oil section. Now, this one's not going to be as long. I think we probably already know a lot about oil. I'm hoping you guys do. And then next week, we're going to start into my favorite stuff, which is renewable energy. But let's get this oil thing out of the way. And this is the wonderful word oil, everybody. And in this presentation, we're going to talk about how it's formed, how we extract it and use oil. Talk about its primary uses. We'll talk a little bit about the marketplace basics of oil. We're talking about the EOR, the energy rate of investment on oil. We'll talk about depletion of oil supplies around the world. That is that peak oil stuff we were talking about. I had you read up on and stuff like that. And then we'll talk about some of the environmental, political, social, and economic impacts of oil around the world. All right? So let's get into it. So, how is oil formed? The same process, okay? We have the sun that shines up here in the sky, and these plants, okay, magically are able to convert the sunlight into stored energy, chemical energy, for the rest of us to be able to use. But oil comes from a very, a very specific type of plant that's able to do this. It doesn't. It's not like coal where it's a whole bunch of different stuff. It's basically algae. Okay, this little algae right here, because inside this algae, it's basically a single-celled organism, and inside of it, there's a lot of these things that they convert. They take that sunlight and they convert it to what's called lipid oils. All right. And then what happens is this algae has died over time and just laid down there on the bed of the uh, ground and gets covered up by some dirt and stuff like that. And then all of a sudden we have that oil deposit on the bottom because all this stuff that's holding that lipid oil, all that's left is lipid oils. And the lipid oils get tossed around and mashed up and fermented and turned into that uh, great French wine. All right. So oil technically is not actually renewable, all right, because that takes millions of years. But we'll talk about in the energy, in the renewable energy section, biofuel section, we can actually make this oil that we use that's millions of years old and we find by the Earth's pressure in today up here. Okay, it's just algae. It's just taking the sunlight and letting the algae convert it into lipid oils, and then we extract it. We'll talk about that a little bit more in the biofuel section. Okay. And the drillings is the same as we saw with the methane, right? We got a nice little pocket down here with conventional oil. We can also frack for it. There's some tight shell. Boy, tight plays. Excuse me, I'm sorry about that. Tight plays we can get that are filled with oil. All right. It's also there's oil and a mixture of gas in there too. Okay, so just like um, getting regular oil or regular natural gas. There's also what's called tar sands, and we'll talk about these a little bit later in the presentation. That's where we're getting primarily all of our oil today in the United States. That is okay. Refining and results in diversity of fuels. So crude oil, just like natural gas, we can refine it and make different things, just like we get the butane and the propane and the natural gas and the methane and all that other rigmarole. There's a lot of different things in there because crude oil is a mixture of hundreds and hundreds of hydrocarbons. It must go under the refining process. So we take this out, and that's just basically due to heating it up, okay, throughout a boiler. All right, and as it raises in temperature, it becomes more refined into fuel oil, which we use for like heating our homes. Okay, lubricating oil would be like for your cars. Okay, your car's engine. Okay, diesel would be for your diesel. And kerosene and the gasoline is what we basically use here in the United States to drive our cars. And naphtha and butane are used in the higher industry, in industry use when we're trying to get the higher bang for the buck for the burn. Okay, So the separate products are the refined oil, specialized fuels for heating, cooking, transportation. Each one has its different purpose. All right. So we'll take the gas. Most of it oil we use for gasoline for driving our cars. Okay, but we still have the diesel fuel. Diesel fuel is basically the same as heating oil too, as well. All right. And then there's a special carbon chain that we go after that allows us to do the jet fuel to be able to run our planes. Because imagine the energy it takes to get all that mass going that fast to be able to do the laws of physics and allow that plane to take off. I mean, that is a lot of energy in that jet fuel. We would not be able to run that fast, right? I mean, that video that you saw, can you imagine how much human labor that would be to get a plane to take off just once? I can't even, I don't know if anybody's ever done that calculation. I mean, that podcast talked about it being, I hope you all listen to the podcast. But it talked about 1 year of labor or 1 barrel of oil is worth 40 years of labor. Just imagine how many years 1 barrel of oil is worth for a plane taking off. Oh, yeah, that's a lot. All right, our human labor would be that's a lot of energy needed. The primary uses for oil, basically transportation. That is the biggest one. This is my biggest scare right here. And we'll talk about this a little bit more during peak oil, but we are basically dependent on oil for how we get around here in the United States, at least. Some of the foreign countries, yes, they have some good rails and stuff like that, trains. But here in the United States, we're basically car bound, right? Especially where I grew up. I grew up in Pittsburgh, so I'm sure you have always seen Pittsburgh. And there's not too many buses or trolleys or anything like that in Pittsburgh. It's really kind of car dependent, in my humble opinion. Okay, we're trying to shake that image. Okay, but right now, in and out of town is basically, from the suburbs is a car thing. Okay, unless you live in the South Hills, then you got maybe the trolley is pretty good, but our busing system out here really is not too good either. Good downtown, but not when we're out here in the South Hills where I live. All right, residential, about 3%, 3.9, 9.5 billion gallons of oil used just to be able to heat our homes. Okay, commercial is for heating as well. And industrial could be also making different products, all right? Because a lot of your products that we actually touch and use, or our tires, our roads, our refrigerators, there's a lot of oil in just about everything, just like natural gas. The fossil fuels are not only used to burn and get energy to run our cars on, but it also makes these products, these plastics, all right? And a lot of things. And, God, we need to remember that sometimes these things are kind of needed, all right? Yeah, maybe we can make our pillows out of something different inside using nylons, okay, synthetic fibers. I think that's probably a good idea, all right? But, a nice little solid thermos, all right, is actually a nice idea to reuse, right? So I'm not tossing it away, okay? But I do hate the non-reusable water jugs. I think this kind of plastic just cracks me up, man. Right? One single use I don't like, but I think the durability that oil gives us, the carbon chains that it allows us to extract to make this durable, uh, plastic water bottle is a lot better, in my humble opinion, than what we can produce from a regular plant. Because it will take up more, ecological economics. If we did this out of plant-based material and make some of this plastic, though I think we can, especially the single use and stuff like that. All right, it would be better worth it for the total throughput if we just get the real solid stuff. We need some medical devices for that too. All right, I got some plastic in me. Okay, not just only the fibers too, but I got some plastic that it's a medical device that's inside me. Okay. The price of oil and gasoline over time. So as you can see, the price of oil and gasoline kind of stayed consistent. So the price of gas will be over here. So it's 1 gallon, $1 a gallon, $1.80, 2.40, all right, 3.50, all the way up to 4.80. Okay, and then over here is the price of a barrel of oil, 20, 40, 60, 80, 100. Okay, and this is the time frame. So you can see that the price of gasoline and oil are closely correlated, right? And one goes up, the other one goes up, one goes down, the other one goes down. Okay, because it's a derivative of the oil. So it's we never really have too big of a spread. All right. And in the worst times, I mean, this was a big, I guess we don't have 1974. I should have gone back to already 1974 because we had the first oil shock back then. Got to remember when next time I take this class, it changes and get back to 1974 because that was the first oil shock. This was the second oil shock during the Great Recession. What happened to man? Just in 1974, we got cut off. Right? The OPEC said we're not giving you any oil. We just ran it. There was no supply. And here, this downturn right here, the this downturn right here in the price of gas and oil was that the demand shut down. It wasn't the supply this time. It was the demand that said, hey, okay, we don't need it anymore. And we had a glut in the marketplace and the price collapsed. Right? But it turned back up and went back to its historical run about $100 a barrel. This is when we started fracking like crazy. This is when we started fracking the heck out of the Rocky Mountains, man. All right after the Great Depression, because we needed the jobs, okay, because of the Great Recession, and we supplied these people with a lot of easy money to go down and start drilling, all right, and the price was the right. So when they did their feasibility studies, it looked really good because a barrel of oil was $100, right? And then suddenly it has tacked down to 60 to $40 here, and this probably cuts off around 2018, 2019, I would assume. All right, because we had another great thing. Remember that in 1974 we had the OPEC cut us off from the oil. Here we said we can't use it anymore, and then we had probably the craziest day I've ever experienced in the marketplace. All right, and it was probably the craziest week. All right, this is the day where WTI crude prices actually went to zero. So on May, I can't believe it was April. I think it was April 26th or 24th or something like that. If you bought a future, this was the day it was actually expiring. So it was probably like the 15th or 16th. So yeah, it was expiring. So it was in the middle of the month of April. And if you bought a futures contract way out here and said, I'm going to buy this oil from you way back here, when it was delivered, you had to actually pay to give it away, right? You were forced at that time of period to take a delivery of that oil, but there was nowhere to put it, right? So it wasn't a supply thing. It wasn't a demand thing. Oh, I guess it was a demand thing because there was nowhere to put it. Everything was full. All the, we talked about those salt mines before, right? Right? All those salt mines that they store the natural gas in, they also store oil in, right? So that storage of the natural gas is the same as oil, right? And there's these extra tankers out there that are floating all over the ocean. We got so many tankers out there full of oil on the big ocean. It's incredible. Every one of those tankers were filled up. All right, people were like loading up the oil because the prices were just kept on going down and down and down here. Okay, I remember the day before this happened, I actually bought into a mutual fund that was part of these oil futures. And I was like, it's $4 a share to get into this thing. I'm like, it's a bargain. Oil has to, it can't go down to zero, right? $4 a share. It's got to go back up. It's usually around 40 to 50. All right, it's usually around $40 to $50. That's what it was trading at that time. I was like, so it has to go up. So I bought it and I woke up the next day and it was like $2 a share. I'm like, oh man, I'm out. And that was the day I sold right in the morning. That was the day it tanked to like $32. Right? And then later on, the next like a week, I got into a different mutual fund because that one closed down and it really went through some shaky stuff. So I bought into another one and it did the same thing. I bought into oil futures and I caught this run back up. So it was a very interesting time. But for oil to go to negative prices is unheard of. It's never happened. I mean, for a valued commodity as such to go negative is just unbelievable. And that happened in my lifetime. And like the week before this, all right, because this is during the COVID scare here, all right? So the week before this happened, interest rates were actually negative in the United States, which meant that if you loaned your money to Uncle Sam, you gave him $100, all right, and you expect to get a little interest, maybe like 5% or whatever, and get $105 back, right? You loan Uncle Sam some money for a certain period of time, you expect to get like $105 back or whatever that interest rate is, right? But instead of you getting $100 back when you loan that to Uncle Sam on that day, you would have got $95 back, right? Interest rates were negative for the first time ever a week before this stuff happened. It was unbelievable. I'm telling this COVID scare, you lived through some history, folks. All right. The price of oil around the world is about the same. All right. We saw when we looked through the natural gas, there was a little bit of a disparity between the European gas price and the Japan gas price and the United States gas price. Um, but when we look at the gas prices around the world, Brent in the Western Texas Intermediate crude this is American, and this is basically the European stock market. And you can see that they're tightly correlated, right? And this is due that OPEC really controls what's going on in the oil pricing. They really control the pricing of oil, and we'll talk about OPEC here in a little bit, right? But they can fix the price of oil very, very easily uh, through the way they're organized, all right? When it comes to world petroleum consumption, the United States is by far the best. I mean, I can't say the best, the biggest consumer of oil. All right, because we are 25%, we are 5% of the population, and we consume 25% of the world's energy resources. All right, and every time I hear that, I hear the newscasters say, I don't know why I should throw this in, but every time I hear the newscasters say, well, the United States is 5% of the world's population, but yet we have 25% of the world COVID cases, I think about that stat. Because the United States, we're 5% of the world's population, but we still consume 25% of the world's natural resources. So we might as well get 25% of the COVID, I guess. I don't know. It just seems like we love 25%, 5%, and we love 25%. I mean, you can see our consumption. So we're using about 19 million barrels of oil a day here in the United States. We have had a nice little drop off right here. All right, but that's basically what we've been using. We've been using 19 million barrels of oil per day for some time now. All right, and it has gone a little bit up, but okay, of course, now today we have the COVID, so we're not using as much. You can see here, I like this graph too, because you see the former Soviet Union. They used to be one of the superpowers in the world. They collapsed. You can see how their oil usage has actually dropped so much. I mean, there's a huge gap in their consumption, right? Japan, nice and flat. China is increasing, and they've got 1 billion people. We have 333 million. It's about 330 million, 333, about 330 million people here in the United States consuming 19 million barrels of oil a day. All right. If China wants to live like us, okay, they got a ways to go. They got about tripled. You see, they're about what at 5? Yeah, probably about triple their consumption. They're about at 5 million barrels a day in this graph. All right, and they got 1 billion people too. All right, so they have 1 billion more. They have 1.3 billion people. They have 1 billion more people. Could you imagine if 1 billion more people consumed as much oil as we do a day? Holy guacamole. I don't think we'd run out like lickety split. There'd be no way to handle that. Okay? And I hope some of those podcasts that we'll listen to kind of help you realize that sometimes our expectations really don't fit what we have in the ground. All right? India is the same way. India has 1.3 billion people as well. They're the second biggest population. China's the biggest, India's the second. And if both these countries want to live like us, they got to start consuming a lot more oil. Peak oil is probably my biggest concern. And I don't say that just because it might be Armageddon or something like that. And I think we've already went through it. All right. It's just that we're just going to run out. So whether or not climate change happens or not, we are going to run out of oil. That's just the kind of the physics of laws of nature. We only have a limited part of a limited amount of supply of fossil fuels out there. And in 1956, this guy King Hubbard, M. King Hubbard, predicted the United States would hit peak oil in 1970s. He was almost spot on. And remember, peak oil is like right here on top of the bell curve, right? And he was almost spot on. So it would have been right. The Rex would have been right here at the top. Okay, that would have been the peak oil. So it's when we hit mass production of oil, and then it goes into what's called terminal decline. We can never get out any more oil than this, right? Because technology and placement and all that tight oil will not let us get it out. We ran out of all the low-hanging apples, and now we are getting less harvest from the top of the trees. Okay, and I believe that this was peak oil. But you can see here we have this huge upswing in oil production here in the United States. And when you went through that EIA assignment, you saw that upswing. I'm sure when you did the pricing, right, or the production, and saw what was happening, and saw that upswing as well that I have right here. And when I think about peak oil, I remember that we're going over, we're trying to capture hydrocarbons here in this energy dilemma that we're trying to chase. Okay, I'm trying to get. And those hydrocarbons, each one's a little bit different. So the peak oil, the oil that King Hubbard was talking about, is that bubbling crude that Jed talks about. That good quality crude oil that he shot at the ground, come bubbling up. That's the good stuff. That good Western Texas crude oil, right? And that carbon chain is definitely different than the new fracking and deep oil or shell or deep offshore oil well oils. Okay, we even call it have a different name for it. All right, it's called creogen, and it's also called bitumen. All right, so we're going after different things, and those oil chains are different. All right, so just because you add an economic substitute onto the definition of oil does not mean we did not hit peak oil. All right, so I firmly believe we've hit it. All right, because I take each of those carbon chains in a different form, and that it's just the way it is. So sooner or later, whether it's oil or it's natural gas or even coal, someday if we kept on producing, we would hit a peak for each one of those fossil fuels because there is a finite amount. In peak oil, this bell curve definitely has to happen no matter what. If you have a finite amount of any resource, this even happens, this bell curve, we have one for the sun, right? So even the sun is going to run out of energy. It's going to hit its peak energy point and then start declining in its phase, all right? And good thing that's not for like a billion more years, all right? So we still got time. But even there, we even know how to calculate the peak for the sun's energy as well, okay? But the question, is what is peak oil going to do? Are we going to go into apocalypse? Are we going to just easily switch over to another form of oil and not worry about it? Okay, so that's the question we need to ask ourselves. But look here in the United States, we can see that we're never going to be able to really. We don't think even today, the EIA, all right, doesn't think we're going to have enough to be able to really produce past this little peak here. And yeah, this is 2020, and decline is happening in 2030. But some of these are already doing. So they say conventional oil, the stuff that we're used to doing, drilling out of here. The Jed, that good West Texas crude, black gold, peaked around 2005. Right? Everything else on this top of this graph is what's really helping out and carrying us forward. The tar sands, the heavy oil, the deep water, the natural gas liquids, the poor oil, all right, all these big stuff. But all our good stuff here in the Middle East, and Russia, and Europe, all peaked back in 2005. Okay, and they all started to decline. Okay, but we were able to find different apples to go pick. and keep our production up to make it look like we're not at peak oil. But even sooner or later, these will run out and start declining as well. Okay, unless we find some more sources, and we might find some more sources of all these oils. Okay, but like I said during the national gas selection, that I think geologists know what they're doing. They've searched all over the world for this stuff. Okay, it's big money. We're drilling farther offshore nowadays because we're trying to get to the oil. So you can see this is the far deep water oil. So this blue line, right, is what we started to do recently. All right, go way off ashore and put out these big, huge oil rigs. And expect it to last for a little bit. It's still supposed to go down by 2030. So you got about 40, 60, say 46, 40, 40, 50 years of oil out there. That's about it. Is it worth really chasing? Okay, we've gotten like 60 years of oil and even longer out of these sources. Okay, but when we do that, we have a lot more troubles. Okay, because it gets a lot more expensive and a lot more dangerous. There was the deep water drilling accident that happened. So this was a drill bit. I think it was in what 2010. They were drilling out there, and they thought they had this blowout preventer all the way down there in the bottom of the ocean. And if they drilled down, it would automatically shut down. We wouldn't worry about. But guess what? It didn't exactly work. All right, it didn't shut down as planned. And oil, not only did the rig catch on fire and all these people die, right, and jump overboard and all that other stuff. And we had a couple people die, but not everybody died. We had an oil spill going on the bottom of the ocean that we could not turn off. We had to get these deep water robots down there to shut it off, and oil, was all over the place out there in the Gulf region. I'm pretty sure you guys might have heard about this oil spill that happened during the Obama administration, like I said, only about 10 years ago. And we're still cleaning up for it, right? We're still using the same thing, paper towels and Dawn, cleaning up our beaches. We're not really having any special technology to be able to suck this oil out. It's more like a time-consuming place. Um, when I was growing up, we had the Exxon Valdez in Alaska that happened, right? And that one was just a tanker, right? It wasn't like a well at the bottom of the up in the Arctic. It was a tanker that ran around the shore and got a hole in one of its hulls, and it wasn't even the full ship that leaked. It was just a bit of the oil, and we are still cleaning up that Exxon Valdez area today. So watch the Gulf area where this happened, and see how long it's going to take to clean up. It's going to be effective forever, right? Just like the places in Exxon. I mean, but in the Exxon, just like the places in Alaska that was affected by the Exxon Valdez. But it does recover, right? It's not like it's the end of the world. This is also, it's not really. I mean, it's toxic and all this other stuff, but you know, oil spills happen naturally in the world as well. Okay, in nature. Okay, there could be something that can happen to have oil released from the ground or whatever. Okay, so they're not unusual, but these are man-made catastrophes. Okay. Another big thing when it talks about geopolitical stuff and climate change, the melting ice is actually opening up the Arctic. Okay, and there is a big race to get some boats out there, the drilling rigs. You see a drilling rig right back here. Um, and they want to take this drilling rig and they want to take it up to the Alaska, up to the Arctic, do some what's called offshore drilling. All right. And since the ice, it's warmer thanks to climate change. Okay. There's not as much ice flows up there, and it's not as crazy, brutally cold. So they thought that maybe we can get this oil rig up there. And we've been trying to do this for a while, and the Soviet Union or Russia is still trying to do this. So every country is still trying to do this. But we actually allowed the Royal Dutch Shell to go up there and start drilling. Okay. The first time the drilling rig ran aground during the storm, right, and it leaked contaminated, was crushed during testing. It was a big trouble. The second time, an icebreaker ran aground and had to be towed for repair. So it was just a disaster. They tried it twice, and each time was very tough. The first time they had to turn around because they got in trouble with the storm and stuff. Second time they actually got it set up, but they really didn't find anything when they drilled. It was kind of a waste of time. But I love these people, man. These people are my heroes for this during this time because they actually some of the native Alaskan people and other activists got together and they tried to bring their kayaks out here to stop it from going. Right? You see, I like this little shell and the pirate symbol. "Arr, matey, we're gonna stop you from drilling." Right? And but these guys are my favorite. This is like Greenpeace, and they would actually hang from the bridge that this oil rig was gonna be going underneath. All right, and they're hanging here so that they would, if the oil rig went underneath, they'd kill them. All right, and they stayed here for like a week. It was finally they got pulled back up. They pulled them up. All right, but boy, that takes some guts to do that. And this is a known technique for activism, peaceful activism, but they are disrupting their business. And boy, Dutch oil shell wasn't happy, and they actually won a court, and these people got taken away and all this stuff, and they got to do the thing, and they didn't find what they were expecting. All right, but I don't think that's going to stop them. I think we're still going to try to go out to the Arctic and do some more. All right. Besides the drilling in the Arctic that's open for new oil discoveries and harvesting, um, we're doing what's called oil sands, and this is really, really popular. The oil sands, or oil shale, um, are very popular sources of energy. All right, that we get, but the EROI is not too good. So you can see here is the EROI of the different grades of coal, right? All the way up to 0 to, sometimes hypothetically you might even get up to over 50, right? Oil and gas is, nowhere even close. It doesn't even get to 25, right? But now we're going after what's called the tar sand. This is where we get most of our oil from, right? Here in the United States, what's called tar sands. Oil shale is second. All right, you can see the ERI. We're looking at 10 to 5 maybe barrels for every 1 barrel you put in. I'd rather have gotten 20. Okay, and then here's the ethanol and the renewable oils that we can make, and we'll talk about these in the biofuel section. All right, but they're comparable to the tar sands and oil, so we're on par. I like this, so we're on par that the energy rate of return is equal. Right now, hopefully, we can mass produce it and do some other things to beat out the tar sands and oil shales to start running our cars on something different. All right, but these sands are they are dirty stuff. All right, they're dirtier than dirty because what we have to do is basically scrape off. This is all done in the tundra. All right, so these sand oils is primarily found in Canada in what's called the boreal forest in the tundra area. So we scrape off all that old permafrost, and we just get down to a certain layer. And inside the layer, this is all like old sand and grit and all this other stuff. And inside that sand and grit is just oil, this creogen. All right. And we take that sand and that grit and all this dirt and we wash it off and separate the oil from the creogen, and we get this tar stuff. It's not like the oil that we're used to see pouring out, but it's more like the oil you see like an asphalt. All right. It's really gritty and not as viscous as the typical crude oil. Right. So we had to add a lot of chemicals and stuff to it to send it down a pipeline. Right, and you guys probably have heard about the Keystone XL pipeline before. Okay, it was very popular during the Obama administration because we tried to stop Obama from putting it in there, and he said he's not going to build it, and then all of a sudden Trump came back and said he's going to build it. I don't know if it's on. I think it's pretty sure it's being under construction right now. Right, but here's the oil sands up in the tundra. Right, and we have built a pipeline already. One. Okay, and this is one of our major hubs to go to get to the market in the United States. Most of all oil actually comes from Canada right down to this major hub and then piped throughout the United States to help us go. All right, but this also here in Illinois, there's another big refinery area here, but also some comes down to Houston. All right, to these ports of calls, and this is where we take that oil and then we actually transport it out. All right, and one of the The additional segment called the Keystone XL pipeline has proposed to increase capacity. We want to be able to get more stuff down, and not necessarily to the center of the United States, but actually down to these ports. All right, and they want to take a shortcut through some people's homes. And I don't know if you saw some of the protests that happened during this time, but people were getting arrested and chaining themselves up to the White House fence and saying, "Hey, we don't want you to do that Keystone Pipeline." Because the climate scientists calculate that if we were to use all the oil in the Keystone in the tar sands, it would be game over for climate. We would not have a climate to recognize. We would have to release so much carbon into the atmosphere. It would be game over. There's no way. So why even go after it? But that is our primary source of gasoline here in the United States. It's brought to you from the tar sands and the pipeline, right? And there was a lot of protests. I don't know if you ever saw the Water is Life protest because this pipeline goes right through some Indian native tribal land, all right, that's rightfully theirs, all right, in their waterways, and they didn't want their water blocked, okay, and that's one of the reasons why it's going over here down here to begin with, all right. But the corporations want to be able to take this shortcut, and they weren't allowed to take the shortcut the first time, right, because we actually abided by our treaties and let those people make their own decisions because that's actually their land, all right. Um, but there was a big protest on that, all right, and these people did not fare too well, all right. They've had dogs sticked on them, all right, and they didn't win. Another way we take around uh, these this tar sands is through tankers, all right, through rail, all right. But this stuff is very, very volatile, all right. It's a lot more volatile than your regular oil, all right, because there's a lot more chemicals and stuff to make it liquidy, more viscous, and that adding those chemicals makes it even more volatile. So some of the shaking could actually cause some of these things to actually explode. And this was an old train derailment, right? And I don't know if the train derailed first or an explosion happened first, right? But it was a mess when it happened, right? And people aren't too happy about these railroads, and they want more pipelines. These people don't want the pipeline because it's messing up their uh, water, and say go to the railroads because we already have those pipes. Who knows what's going to happen? I say we get rid of them both. Okay, because the emissions posed the health risk uh, to our carbon dioxide emissions is grave, and I'm really worried about of climate change. Okay, and oil and coal, of course, are our two biggest things. And the two biggest energy things that we need here in the United States is some way to drive around and something to produce electricity with. All right, these two energy needs need to be sustained. All right, the electricity and the transportation. I don't care how we do it, but some way we have to make these sustainable. And we're going to talk about that in during the um, renewable energy section. Okay, because and also we've got to remember our dependence on foreign energy affects our economic security. Okay, and I remember you watched that. I had you watch that video from Comedy Central before you watched I did that assignment. All right, and that is just so telling how every president since Ford could say that, Jimmy, or actually Nixon could say we need to have energy independence from foreign oil. All right. Well, we've learned that have less than 2% of the world's oil or something like that. How are we ever going to be energy independent from oil? We Canada, where we get most of our oil from, 37% of our oil from, is still a foreign country. Okay, so we're always going to be dependent on foreign oil, no matter what happens, right? We'll always need oil. There's some special things that oil is used for. Okay, and the problem is we just got to stop putting so much into the atmosphere that it's offsetting the carbon cycle. Okay, In 1973, I remember I talked about 1974, we got shut off from oil. Okay, I think it was 74, it might have been 78. Because in 1973, OPEC was not designed or organized until 73, and OPEC is the one that shut off our things. But that's just the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, all right? And it resolved to stop selling oil to the United States, created the energy crisis in 1973 or 1978, all right? So OPEC is basically a conglomerate of a couple big countries, all right? I thought I put that picture in there, darn it. I thought I put out a graph of who OPEC was. But OPEC's basically Saudi Arabia, Venezuela, Iraq, Ecuador, I think Nigeria is in there, and a couple other Middle East countries, Kuwait, Qatar, okay? And they actually, what they do is they have what's called a cabal, all right? I don't know if you guys ever heard that term, but it's actually a cabal. They get around and they collude about how much to produce. So Saudi Arabia, Venezuela, and Iraq, and Soviet Russia will get together and sit down and say, okay, Russia's not in there. They'll talk about how much they are going to produce so that they can fix the price of oil, because that's what they're actually doing. Because price is a function of supply and demand, right? So if you can control the supply, you can control the price because you'll be able to affect things. Okay, if you want to decrease the supply, that's going to throw up the price, and the demand will also decrease. All right, so they always want to have a nice even flow. All right, and keep the price. Right now, they wanted to keep it around $30. Right before that dollar crashed, um, they were trying to the oil crash. They were trying to say, let's cut production so we don't have an oversupply in the market and all that stuff. And them and the Saudi Arabia and Russia had this big spat, and neither one of them wanted to cut prices. Right, so they went from like 30 down to 20, down to 10, down to 4. Right, it just went down real fast because of that dispute. Those two big powerhouses, the people that own most of the oil, were talking about. Right, or two big producers. I don't think Russia doesn't. Or I guess Russia does have a lot of oil. They just can't pump it out yet because of the geopolitical stuff of us sanctioning them, right? Believe it or not, Rex Tillerson was one of our secretaries of state under Donald Trump. He was the first secretary of state under Donald Trump, and he was a retired CEO from Exxon, right? And he wanted to get up there and get those sanctions off because if he did, Exxon has a lot of rights in those oil fields up there in the Siberia of Russia, right? He didn't get through. Some reason Trump didn't let him lift those sanctions. Well, I guess the Senate didn't let him lift those sanctions. I think Trump did want to lift them, but that's neither here nor there. But it's big political stuff, this oil, all right? So in conclusion, oil is just ancient sunlight, and its primary use is for transportation. So it really scares me when I think about peak oil and all this stuff. How my kid's gonna drive their car, right? How they're gonna get around if they don't have any oil? Because we saw in the EIA assignment, we have America has about 11 years of oil left in the ground, right? And the world has about 40. So within my lifetime and your lifetime, we're going to be really out of oil, basically. And remember, we will never run out of oil, right? We just we won't have the supply to use. Okay, so there's going to be some stuff left. But are we going to be ready to when we can no longer meet our demand in that peak oil? What are we going to do? How are we going to transfer and what are we going to transfer over to? Until then, our consumption of oil does not look like it's going to stop anytime soon. We really love um, using oil. We really do have an oil addiction here in the United States. It's kind of crazy. All right. So that's the oil section. And like I said, I hope you guys know a lot about oil already. Um, I will post this up on Blackboard for you. And then next week, I believe we are going to start renewable energies and solar. I think we also have a test. Let's see what's going on here. I think next week is also our, what is it, week? Is it going to be week 4? I don't have your test in here. I have the. I know I have a test somewhere. I have to check the syllabus. I might have not updated it on week 4, but I think week 4. Yeah, no readings this week due to exam. All right. So next week we're going to start renewable energies, and then I am actually going to put you up a little essay questions. Okay, a couple quick questions about what we went through with coal, natural gas, and oil, and I'll do that on Monday when I do the overview. But just don't forget that we have no real homework next week. We just have the exam. All right, and then I'll start doing the lecture presentations on solar and wind. Okay. So I hope this helps you guys out, and I will see you on Monday with the overview of the week. All right, test week. All right, thanks, guys. We'll see you soon.